Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class. So today we have a little bit of notes, and then I also put a link in Schoology in the fiscal policy folder that says fiscal policy vocab Bookit or something. It's a Bookit link. So after watching this video and answering some questions throughout the video, you can go in and practice your vocab for fiscal policy unit in the link provided in Schoology. Okay, and hopefully you've already taken your quiz, and don't forget we have light speed, so I can see if we are, using the internet, which we hopefully are not, and or not, whatever. Okay, so today we're learning a new graph, which is not a graph like aggregate supply or the PPF curve, which we changed and we shifted and we learned these shifters or whatever. This new graph is actually kind of like a standalone, like we draw it once and we learn what it explains, but we're not going to be changing it or anything. It's just like an image. Okay, and that graph is called the Laffer curve, and you can see it here right on the screen. So the Laffer curve shows a relationship between taxes, like how much money the government collects in taxes from your paycheck, and then the government revenue. Government revenue means how much money the government collects. Does it collect $1 million, $5 million, $0, whatever. So I'm going to give you some time to, pause it if you need some time to draw it so you can have it in your notes. So the Laffer curve, what you see here on your screen, was actually kind of created by accident. So Arthur Laffer, a famous economist, was at a brunch one day in the 70s, and he was talking about taxes to a friend, and he sketched this graph on a napkin, and basically understood something that people had not figured out before, and he actually won a Nobel Prize in economics that year for creating this graph. And the napkin which this graph was originally posted on is in the Smithsonian. So a little history fact for you. So now looking at this graph, you can see from down here, do I have a pen tool? There we go, a little highlighting tool. Oop, that is not what I wanted. Spotlight? I don't know, maybe. The spotlight's kind of big though. Okay. Fireworks? I don't see any fireworks. Okay, we'll just use the cursor. How about that? So you see that this shape talks about how much government revenue it actually collects when the government taxes. So down here, tax rates. If the government taxes 0% of your income, they collect no percentage of your income, they're going to make no money. So that's why the graph starts right here. If they tax $0, there will be zero revenue collected from people. And then if you follow the curve, well, if the government collects 100% of your income, they're also going to earn $0 in revenue. How does that even make sense? What does that mean? So it makes sense that if the government collects 0%, they're going to get $0. But if the government collects 100% of your paycheck, so every time you work, all the money you make goes to the government, how often are you going to go to work if the government takes your entire paycheck? You're not. You're not going to go to work if the government takes all your paycheck. So when the government taxes 100% of your income, people do not work anymore, which means they're not making any money to be taxed. So the government's taxing 100% of your $0 paycheck. So that's why the curve slopes back over again. So it looks like the equilibrium point is right here in the middle. It looks like it's at 50%. It's not really, it's just drawn that way. There's actually some number between 0 and 100 where higher taxes actually kind of backfires for the government. It brings in less money because the government is taxing too much that people just decide to stay home and take a nap rather than go to work. And so, the government is taxing a larger percentage, but of a smaller amount of money, so they're bringing in less money for themselves. So the Laffer curve basically states, and I wonder if I can type. Can I type? Yeah, okay. So increasing, there we go. Ooh, that's not how you spell increasing. Increasing taxes does bring in more money for the government up to a point. So like up to right here, the government, you know, taxing more does bring in more money for the government. That is correct. Up until that point, whatever this equilibrium point is, it looks like it's 50%, but it's just some number between 0 and 100. And then after that equilibrium point, if you tax more, the government will actually make less money because people work less. So if you tax more, if you tax too much, people will work less, and make less money, meaning the government's also making less money. Ooh, I can't spell. Okay, so if you work too much, or if you tax too much, like if your taxes are close to 100% or 99%, people will work less and they'll make less money because they're working less, meaning the government brings in less revenue because they're taxing a larger percentage, but 100% of 0 is $0. So, if you tax too much, it actually backfires. It's a lose-lose situation. People make less money and the government makes less money. And Arthur Laffer discovered that in a brunch. He's like, hey, if you raise taxes, yeah, that brings in more money, but not forever. At some point, it's going to backfire as people decide, hey, I can just stay home. If I'm not getting paid, might as well just take a nap. Oh, I want to go next. Okay, I'm going to go back to there we go. All right, so today we're going to be talking about, that state. That is fun. See, I wonder if I can edit this out later. Probably not. Rectangle tool? No, don't want a rectangle tool. Text tool? Delete text. Yeah, let's get rid of you. And let's get rid of you. There we go. And let's go back to my pointer. Okay, so there's 3 types of government budgets that a government can have. And a budget is basically when you compare how much money they bring in taxes and then how much money they're actually spending. So that's their budget. And so a country has a balanced budget if the taxes they collect is how much money they spend. Like they bring in $1 million in taxes and they spend $1 million. They're not spending any more or any less than the money that they have. So a balanced budget is taxes is equal to government spending. They're equal to each other. You don't spend any more, you don't spend any less. So if you look at this graph here at the bottom, I got this off of the Federal Reserve Economic Database. They have good graphs. And when this shows our government's budget over the course of what's the earliest year, 1960 to present day, at 0, that means we have a balanced budget. Taxes and government spending are equal to each other. The government did not spend too much. It did not spend too little. It's just right. And so for a long time, we had a balanced budget, but not so much anymore. Another type of budget that the government could have is a budget surplus. A budget surplus is when the government has extra money. So taxes are greater than government spending. That means that they collect maybe $1 million in taxes, but they only spend $500,000. So they've got leftover money. That's what a budget surplus is there's more taxes being collected than the government's actually spending. And you can see that a little bit on our bar chart. Anytime that you have this little blue line go over the 0, that's a budget surplus, where the government actually brought in more money than they used. If a person did that, that's like having extra money. It's just hey, the government brought in $1 million and only spent $500,000. So when that happens, they can fund for future purchases. Maybe they can pay off the debt or something. And so a budget surplus happens when we have contractionary fiscal policy. So we learned yesterday that, remember, and let me get my line tool out, or my pen tool out. Contractionary fiscal policy is when you oh no, we're in a period of inflation. To slow it down, to bring it back under control, we're gonna raise taxes, and we're going to cut government spending. So that's what contractionary fiscal policy. The government raises taxes to slow down spending, and then they also cut their own spending too. They cut government spending. Well, if you raise taxes and you bring in more taxes, and you cut your spending, eventually you're going to run into a surplus. And so whenever we have contractionary fiscal policy to fix maybe an inflationary problem, that actually is going to create this extra money for the government. So, contractionary fiscal policy, while it might slow down the economy, is actually going to give the government extra money to play with for maybe the future. And so that's a budget surplus. I'm going to just move you off to the side. I'm just going to click. Can I move you? No, I can't move you. I have to go back and do that. And can I hide? Yeah, I can. I'm just going to put this off to the side. Well, we don't, if you look at the bar chart down here, if you look at this line graph, it is clear that we do not have a government budget surplus anymore. We do not spend less, the government does not spend less than what it has. In fact, it spends a lot more than what it has, and that's what a budget deficit is. And so a budget deficit is when taxes are less than government spending. So the government actually spends more than what it has. It actually, they collected $1 million in taxes, but they spent $2 million. It's like they don't have $2 million. They only have $1 million. Okay, so that's what a deficit is when the government spends more money than it has. And that is a result of the other type of fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy. So we learned yesterday that expansionary fiscal policy, which is, what we should do in a recession, is cutting taxes. That gives people more money to spend. And if we raise government spending, that also will give people more money to spend. And so expansionary fiscal policy, let's move this, I guess that's good here. Expansionary fiscal policy, cutting taxes, sure, it gives more people more money to spend, but then it doesn't give the government any money to spend. And then they spend more, they raise spending too. Well, that combination is they're going to run out of money pretty fast. They're bringing in less, but they're spending more. Like if a person did that, that's like someone losing a job and then going out and buying presents for themselves. It's like, you don't have any money for that. Don't stop. So, the government budget deficit, we do that all the time. I mean, if you look at this line chart, it's way down here. This was COVID. All those government stimulus checks, they didn't have money for that. They just spent money. The government just spent money that they didn't have. And you can see that we're currently in a budget deficit. We are constantly the government spending more money than it has in taxes. Well, I mean, think about it. I wonder which one of these plans, because this is Congress. This is Congress that is setting taxes and government spending. Congress means you run for office. You are running for office. You are elected. So you have to win elections. And I wonder what wins more elections? Raising taxes or cutting taxes? Which one do you think is more popular? Yeah, cutting taxes. Which one do you think is more popular? Cutting government spending programs, like cutting the military spending and Border Patrol and Social Security, you think that's popular? Or do you think spending more money on those things is popular? Yeah, spending more money and cutting taxes, expansionary fiscal policy is so very popular. It wins elections. No one's going to vote for the candidates hey, vote for me and I'll cut your income by raising taxes and I'm going to slash all those programs. No, contractionary fiscal policy is not popular. Sure, it gives the government a surplus, but that's not what's popular. What's popular is expansionary fiscal policy. Cutting taxes, giving me a bigger paycheck? Heck yeah. Raising government spending, funding my favorite government programs? Sure, why not? But there is a catch. Because if you do this, sure, you're going to boost aggregate demand and boost GDP, but you're going to raise the deficit spending. Deficits are no good for the government. Spending more money than the government has is not it's a house of cards. It's it's good at first and then it's going to collapse. And we'll talk about that tomorrow when I get back. So balanced budget, taxes and government spending are equal to each other. A budget surplus is when there's more collected in taxes than there's spent. And a budget deficit means more spending than they collected in taxes. And two types of fiscal policy, contractionary and expansionary fiscal policy, which we talked about yesterday, are the things that create either surpluses or deficits. All right, guys, have a great day. Don't forget to book it in Schoology because it's there. All right, guys, bye.